This podcast is part of Mishmash Media. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, very good. Welcome to another episode of Curbcast. My name is Ivan.
And I'm Stephen.
And every week we review an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and we review them in chronological order. And we are at the halfway mark of Season 6. We're going to be talking about a very, very funny episode, in my opinion, of Curb, Season 6, Episode 5. Probably one of my favourites of the series so far. I really enjoyed it. The Freak Book.
Yeah, no, great episode. I really liked it as well. We'll talk about it in detail. We'll review it and rate it out of 5 Larrys as we do at the end after we talk about the episode scene by scene. This was one of those episodes where I think I mentioned last week or the week before where sometimes the title gives you a pretty good idea of what the episode's going to be about, or at least one of the storylines. This one I had no idea. I thought, what the hell's a freak book?
What? Yeah.
And obviously it establishes the freak book pretty quickly in the episode, so you know what's going on. But yeah, no idea going in, and good episode.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I thought it was going to be like the lefty call. I had no idea what that was last week, but we found out it's how you take a call with the phone receiver. So
it's not a phone call from a Democrat or a communist or something like that. It's
nothing.
nothing.
I thought it would have been something like that. Yes.
Nothing of the sort.
No, definitely not. Anyway, we will review the episode scene by scene as we always do. And just a bit of housekeeping before we start. If you want to send us an email, say hello, talk about Curb or today's episode or, Seinfeld or anything like that, curbcastpod@gmail.com. And we are on social media, the main platforms. Curbcastpod is where we're at. And Stephen, we got a few other things to do with the podcast.
Yeah, we've got a Patreon, patreon.com/mishmash media, which is the name of our burgeoning podcast network in which we put out Curbcast and in which we put out our previous podcast, But I Don't Want to Be a Secondary Character, which was a Seinfeld-themed podcast examining the secondary characters. And you can check that out on your podcast app of choice as well. And if you want to support us on Patreon, that would be awesome. For as little as $1 US a month, you can help us out, help keep the lights on, so to speak. And we are starting to work on some bonus content that we will be bringing to you a bit later in the year. If you think we're worthy of your cold, hard cash. If you don't want to separate with your money, you can support us by rating us or reviewing us on your podcast app of choice, or just telling a friend or a family member or anyone you know who likes Curb and who you might think would like us. That would be awesome as well.
That would be. And Patreon members do get this episode a little bit earlier. And when available, you do get early access to future episodes of Curbcast as well.
That's right.
Anyway, we'll get into it, buddy. We'll open up the Freak Book and have a bit of a browse and laugh together on the couch.
Yep, we'll look at each other's 3 penises.
Yes. Why not? The Freak Book, Season 6, Episode 5, aired in the US on HBO for the first time on October 7th, 2007. Larry's birthday gift to Ted Danson, a coffee table book called Mondo Freaks, gets him in trouble with everyone he shows the book to, which includes Ted, the limo driver, tennis star John McEnroe, a group of random mourners, and Paul McCartney's ex-wife, Heather Mills. And I heard of the name Heather Mills before, Steve. I'm sure you've probably heard of her in the 2000s. She was married to Paul McCartney. I read from 2000. Oh, no, they were together from 2000. I think they married in 2002, and they've divorced in 2008. So I think they were in the middle of a separation when this episode aired. I was thinking to myself, Steve, because I had heard the name Heather Mills, and I'm like, yeah, like, she sounds familiar. Because there is that scene, like, we'll talk about some highlights of the episode before we get into it, but there was that scene of Heather Mills, mocking Larry at the stadium after Larry laughs at the Freak Book. And I was like, what does Heather Mills have to do with this? She's actually an amputee.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was hit by a police bike by accident, I think in the early 90s, and she had to have part of her leg removed and a few other things as well. So yeah, she has a prosthetic leg, which I had no idea. So yeah, that really surprised me because I was like, what's Heather Mills have to do with this? But yeah, so there you go. I did not know that about her at all. Did you know about Heather Mills's amputation?
No, I only knew her as Paul McCartney's. I remember when they were married, and obviously now they're not. So that's the only capacity I knew her in. I do remember,
yeah, me too. Yep.
Yeah, and I do remember their relationship because she was a bit younger, and Paul McCartney, he could take a shit and people would lose their minds. He's so famous, obviously being a former Beatle. I remember a lot of media coverage. They were one of those kind of like Kim and Kanye, or Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman,
or Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah, just one of those media couples that just dominate the gossip rags and the headlines. They do something so like mundane and people just lose their minds. And obviously their divorce, it was probably a bit messy, and that's really the only capacity in which I knew her because of that media. Even I didn't pay much attention to celebrity stuff, but you couldn't avoid it. It was everywhere.
Yeah, and I don't believe it was actually Heather Mills herself who portrayed the the character. I think it was another British lady because you can see the back of her head when she calls out Larry.
Yeah. So she was probably a bit too busy dealing with a bunch of stuff to make a guest appearance in Curb.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, but anyway, that's my Heather Mills knowledge, and that's all I know about her.
Yeah, that's all I know as well.
Indeed. So some highlights from the episode, Steve. Ted Danson, Larry's a bit worried about his limo driver who's in the limo. He wants him to come in, and after Ted opens his gifts, the limo driver's very drunk, and he tries to hit on Mary.
Yeah, that was surprising. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen because this is the first time either one of us have watched these episodes, so we don't really know what's going on before we press play. But I knew, bringing him in, Larry was very insistent to bring him inside because he felt sorry for him sitting in the car for a few hours, bored. He didn't even have a book. Yeah, I knew bringing him in, something was going to go wrong. He was going to say something or do something, or someone there was going to know him and he had done something in the past. It wasn't just going to be he was going to come in and be like a well-received guest. But I didn't expect him to grope Mary Steenburgen.
Yes, Mary Steenburgen. No, I didn't expect that either.
Yeah.
And also, and also Larry dressed up as a limo driver picks up John McEnroe and antics ensue. I can't wait to talk about that. That's probably my favorite part of the episode. Those two, at first they kind of like, John McEnroe's, basically his reputation is basically him being like an angry person and yelling at people and stuff. So he kind of does that in this episode, but they become friends at the end of the episode. Before they get kicked out of the stadium. So that was, they bond over the Mondo Freaks book.
Yeah, that the Freak book, brings them together. When, what's the limo driver's name again?
Oh, his name is Charlie, and he's actually played by Charlie the limo driver. He's played by the guy who played the Wiz in Seinfeld, Toby Huss.
Oh, yeah, he is too.
Yeah, he's the Wiz. Yeah. Probably the worst character on Seinfeld, which I think when we did our old podcast, Bit of a Basket, I think I did mention when we reviewed the Wiz and the secondary characters. I think I mentioned the Wiz is probably the worst character on the show.
He would be definitely bottom of the barrel. When he calls up Larry and he said, you've got to go pick up this super special client from the airport, I'm going to lose my job. I thought it was going to be Paul McCartney.
Yes.
Because they'd mentioned that they were going to see Paul McCartney. He was coming into town. They were all going to the concert.
Yes.
I thought, surely it's got to be Paul McCartney. So when it was John McEnroe, I'm not a massive tennis fan. Like I'm kind of one of those people who watch it when the Australian Open's on, or like the Soccer World Cup. I'm a soccer fan every 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm kind of that tennis viewer.
Yes.
But John McEnroe has always been someone I found really fascinating. He's an awesome tennis player, but I think just his reputation, even though his heyday was the 80s and maybe the early 90s, I don't know. I've always loved him as a person. I've always found him really fascinating. So when John Rackenmoe,
yes, in an alternate universe.
When he appeared on screen, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I thought it would be Paul McCartney, but I don't know. Maybe they were trying to get. I don't know the production history of this episode, but maybe they were trying to get Paul McCartney, and maybe he didn't want to do it, so they thought, let's get an actress to play Heather Mills.
Yeah, I imagine they at least would have tried to, but I mean, he lives in England as well, so it's not as easy for him to just make, all the stars in this show tend to live in Hollywood, like on the show and also in real life, so it's probably pretty easy for them to just duck down to the studio or wherever they're filming for a day or two to do a guest spot.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Paul McCartney, and he's fucking Paul McCartney, so he's not really someone to make many appearances and things, like he's very selective about his music and when he tours and when he sort of pops up publicly, so
yeah.
Even though Curb was pretty popular at the time in the mid-2000s, it probably still wasn't popular enough for him to say, I'll jump in. So I was a bit disappointed, but I understand as well.
Yeah. I feel that Paul's probably one of those guys who probably doesn't like to kind of mock himself, parody himself on show.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like John McEnroe is like, he probably loved it. He probably loved doing the episode.
Yeah.
He seemed to have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Paul McCartney doesn't seem very uptight, but I can't imagine him being so nonchalant about his own public appearance or public image that he would deliberately lower himself, so to speak, to appear in Curb. Sure. John McEnroe is a pretty chill dude, so it makes sense that he was keen.
Yeah, it does, and I'm glad that he was in it. It's definitely, I think the Larry and John's relationship kind of like escalated the episode, for me, and that's why I think it's probably one of the best I've seen so far.
Yeah, and it makes sense that they become friends eventually as well, because they're both like, John's probably a bit more normal or he is a bit more normal than Larry, even though he's got the reputation for being a bit of a, at least on court, being a bit of a jerk. He, off court, he seems pretty relaxed and pretty normal. But, they've both got the grumpy aspect to their personality.
Yeah.
It manifests differently. Like Larry's grumpy is different to John's grumpy. But I think that grumpy, and also that they're willing to laugh at people who are, less fortunate in a book. That jerk streak kind of bonds them.
Yeah. Yeah, so it certainly worked.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we get in the episode, my friend?
Sure.
All right, scene 1 of the Freak Book. Larry is reading a coffee table book and he's grossed out by it as he shows Cheryl the book, which is about freaks. He says that this is Ted Danson's gift for his birthday later tonight. Cheryl says that the cemetery plots are finalized and that the Dansons and the Greens will be buried next to the Davids as the limo driver Charlie arrives. Larry is still reading the book and he's having a good laugh and he's surprised about all the freaks in it as Cheryl tells him that they have to go to the party as they're all dressed up. They've got the present ready to go and Larry wants to gift. He thinks that Ted will enjoy a book about freaks for some reason and that's his gift to Ted and he's reading the book before he he gives it to Ted. I have been in situations where I have gifted like books or something to people. And then I've had a bit of a squeeze before I've gift wrapped them. Have you been in that situation? Like it's happened like a couple of times in my life.
Yeah, I've bought a gift for someone thinking, oh, they might like this or this is a bit different. And then half thinking, oh, geez, I wish I bought myself a copy or maybe I'll keep it and try to give them something else or whatever. In this scene, though, it feels like the Freak Book is a gift that Larry bought, but he couldn't think of, it almost feels like he bought it for himself.
Yes.
And he couldn't think of, or maybe he forgot to get
Ted a book.
Ted
a present.
Ted a gift, and he's like, oh, this will do because it's, he bought it 3 days ago and it's brand new, so it looks like it's a recent purchase. It looks like he bought it for himself more than Ted.
More than Ted, yeah. And this is a very short scene as well. It just establishes, Larry and Cheryl are just about to leave. I love how Larry, he's just in his normal gear. He's in like his slacks.
Yeah.
And stuff. Whereas Cheryl's all dressed up looking really nice. And, Charlie, the limo driver, turns up in his suit and Larry's just dressed in his slacks. I love it.
Yeah, and I can't remember if they say, but, being Ted and at his house and being a birthday party, I think Larry got the memo that, probably didn't have to wear a tux, but put a bit more effort in, but he just doesn't give a fuck.
No, he doesn't. He just doesn't care. I love it. But yeah, Like I said, a very, very short scene and it just, I think it just introduces Charlie.
Sure.
Yeah. They pull up at the Danson's house. Larry asks Charlie, the driver, if he's doing anything while he waits for them for a few hours. Charlie says that he'll wait and he doesn't need anything to read as they get out. Larry says, oh, do you want me to get you a newspaper? Do you want me to get you a book? Do you want a brochure? Do you want anything? Anything to kind of tide you over? But Charlie says, no, I'm just happy to sit in here. What do you think? Like, is it kind of, would it be okay for a limo driver to, peruse something while they're waiting? Or is it kind of part of their job description to just sit there?
No, I mean, even if they had to come early, they said, pick us up at 11, but they got a phone call at 9 o'clock to say, come pick us up, we're leaving early. Like, if they're reading a book, what's the difference between them sitting there and staring out the window or them reading a book?
Yeah.
It's, it's downtime. They can, as long as they're not doing something that impedes their ability to do their job quickly, if they went into a bar and started drinking beers and watching a sports game and they've got a phone call to say, hey, come pick us up now, and they were half cut or engaged in the game or couldn't hear their phone or something because it was a loud bar, that's going to impede their job. But if they're just sitting in a car reading, then no, that's more than fine.
Yeah. I feel that Larry's concerned with Charlie in relation to what he's going to do. I don't think he's concerned about Charlie. I think he's bewildered as to why limo drivers would just sit there. Like, it just doesn't make sense to him.
Yeah, you're right. He's confused and bewildered. He wants to get him a book or get him something to read, not because he wants to relieve Charlie's boredom. He wants it to make sense for himself. He's like, now that I know that he's not doing nothing, that itch is scratched.
I know. It just doesn't, to him, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, he can't just accept. It's one of those, Larry gets a bee in his bonnet or he gets fixated on something and he'll just go to any length to make it make sense. But yeah, you're right. It's not for Charlie. It's for him. It's to satisfy his own, to relieve his own confusion.
Yeah, and to relieve his own morbid curiosities.
Exactly, yeah.
The scene cuts to Ted's party and there's people all having a good time, drinking, having a wonderful time. Larry is talking to Mary Steenburgen about the cemetery plots. As he says, he doesn't know anyone at the party. He says, I know you, I know Ted, Cheryl, the Greens, and that's it. He doesn't know anyone else at the party. And I get that feeling. Like, I've been to parties and situations before where I don't know anyone else. But, you eventually, like normal people, eventually meet other people and you socialize with them. But Larry, to him, he's just extremely uncomfortable in the situation.
Yeah, you just kind of, you said yes to go into the party knowing that you probably wouldn't know anyone except, your close friends. So you shouldn't be surprised when you rock up and there's not many people there you know. And yeah, like, I've met some really cool friends and really cool people just at parties. Maybe I just knew the host and I was the only friend of theirs in a certain, circle of theirs, or, I was the stranger, but then you become really good mates with them or you get along really well with them. But Larry, it's just like, well, I don't know anyone, so I'm going to have a bad time.
Pretty much, just completely antisocial.
Yeah, he doesn't see this as an opportunity to maybe meet some new people or have fun with some strangers, or just roll with it and say, well, if I don't know anyone, that's fine. I'm still going to try and have a good time. He's like, well, I don't know anyone, therefore this party won't be good.
Yeah, and Mary's so sweet. Like, Mary's just trying to, like, support him and say, oh, you can meet some people and stuff. And Larry's like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't want to meet people, so it probably doesn't bother him either way. It's just more of an observation than him voicing concerns of, oh my God, this is going to be so awkward for me. But yeah, she's a great hostess and she's just a sweetheart, like you said.
Yeah, and we have commented when we did Ted and Mary in season 1, episode 2 of Curb. We talked about her in detail, and we really like her pleasant personality.
Totally, yeah. She's just very accommodating and very sweet and very nice. I'm surprised as well that, Larry obviously had a bit of a crush on her in season 1 and he was finding excuses to go shopping with her. And Mary seems not to reciprocate the crush, but I think she just liked the fact that he liked pretending, even though he was pretending, she was able to do things with Larry that Ted would normally probably try and find a reason not to do, like go shopping and stuff and hang out with her mum.
Yes.
I think she just saw Larry as like a girlfriend who happened to be a man, rather than an actual potential romantic or love interest or a crush. But obviously, for some reason, maybe it's just because Ted and Larry have had so much tension in the last sort of 5 seasons between Ted and Mary in this episode. Larry doesn't seem as besotted with...
No.
Like, he's not rude to her, or like he's obviously, he doesn't dislike her. He still talks to her normally, but he doesn't have that starry-eyed boy crush that he did in Ted and Mary.
That's certainly disappeared, yeah. And look, he's gone through so much. He's died, literally in season 5, and then came back to life. He's gone through so much stuff. I think it would have been really tiring and pretty exhausting if they continued with this subplot. I think,
and
I'm glad they kind of just killed it.
Yeah, and it makes sense as well because Larry, he becomes fixated on something, obsesses over it, and then forgets it pretty quickly as well. Like once it isn't what he wants it to be, he's very quickly to drop it. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just like, he was obsessed with Mary and then whatever turned him off. I don't think it was a gradual slowdown of the feelings or decline of the feelings. I think it was just something happened on or off screen and he just made a choice in his mind. No, don't like her anymore that way.
That's it. Yeah.
It was just off.
Yeah, and he's fixated on something else. Yeah, makes sense.
He's moved on.
Yes. Mary walks off as Larry goes up to the bartender and the bartender asks how we're doing and Larry says, pretty good. Pretty good. He comments on the bartender's bow tie and he says, why do you have to wear a bow tie? The bartender explains the uniform order system that Mr. Danson, as he calls Ted, that Mr. Danson ordered. He specifically instructed all the staff to wear bow ties. Larry asks about it and he says, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to wear a bow tie. And he says that he needs to talk to Ted about this as he feels it's wrong. The bartender begs him not to say anything to Mr. Danson, even though Larry tells the bartender, who introduces himself as Jamie, that he'll still do it anyway. So there's a bit of in this scene, there's a bit of a back and forth. Like Larry insists to speak to Ted, but Jamie is like, please, no, don't. Please, I do not want you to do this, please, sir.
Yeah.
So, and he's, obviously... because then he'll think that Ted thought that maybe Jamie was objecting to the bow tie, which will probably get him fired, which wouldn't be good.
Yeah, I think he doesn't want to lose his job, or he just doesn't want to be made to feel awkward in front of Ted. Like it's his boss for the night. You're employing me. Got to kind of do what the boss says. That's what I'm getting paid for. And I just noticed for some reason Larry, he's just decided that he's like hero of the working class in this episode. I'm gonna. Yeah, but it's not motivated by actual, these people are being oppressed or, marginalized. I'm going to, become their champion because I have the power or the ability to. It's just more, this thing bugs me. I need to solve it for me.
Yeah, solve it for me, not necessarily for Jamie.
No. He doesn't actually care about the fact that this guy has to wear a bow tie and maybe it's a bit uncomfortable, or the limo driver might be bored shitless for a few hours. It's just his obsessive compulsive, this thing doesn't sit right with me. I need to do whatever I need to do. Even like through all the objections and through all the, no, it's fine, don't worry about it. He needs to just scratch that itch.
He does. He has to be very curious as he walks up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry goes up to Ted. He wishes him happy birthday as he confronts him about the bow tie situation. Larry says that he feels uncomfortable seeing someone wearing a bow tie at the party. Ted asks if the bartender Jamie said anything about it. And he says that Jamie cannot take his bow tie off. They get into a bit of a situation, like a bit of an argument about it, but eventually Larry laments. Larry asks if his driver can come into the house. And Ted says that he probably shouldn't, but he's happy to get someone to send him coffee to the car or something like that to make him, to kind of perk him up a little bit. Larry says that he used to drive limos and he understands how boring it is to sit in the car. And Ted can't believe that he used to drive limos. So I'm guessing Larry probably did that as a side gig while he was writing Seinfeld or, in his stand-up comedy days, pre-Seinfeld as well. Maybe he did limo driving as like a side thing. So he understands that can be pretty boring. So maybe Larry can relate to the Charlie the limo driver.
That's true.
He displays empathy.
No, that's a good point, actually. I forgot about that.
Yeah, me too. Before I started reading, I'm like, oh, yeah, Larry's not did limo driving. That's right.
Yeah. But he still goes too far. Like, he should take people at their word. Like, it's nice to be concerned, saying, hey, do you want a book, or do you want me to get you something, or do you want to come inside? If someone says no 14 times, you don't insist on the 15th time. You go, okay, well, this person's an adult. They said no, I'll leave it at that. He's still being a bit self-serving, but yeah, no, you're right. It is motivated by, at least partially, by some empathy.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that scene. Like, as soon as I was reading it, I was like, oh yeah, Larry said he did limo driving. And Ted can't believe it. Like, I love Ted's reaction when he's like, you used to drive limos.
Yeah, so really? You used to drive limos? Yeah. Because I think Ted was, before he was an actor, I think he was a tradie or something, wasn't he? Like a chippy, or like that's a carpenter for our non-Australian friends.
I think he was. He did something similar.
I vaguely remember, like, he was a painter.
I can Google it for you.
Yeah, like a tradesman of some sort. Contractor for our
Contractor. Early life and education. Early career. Let's see. Because I know Harrison Ford was a carpenter before.
Maybe it was Harrison. Maybe I'm getting confused because they're both like good-looking, tall '80s leading actors. I'm probably confusing the two.
Yeah. I think you mean Harrison Ford. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Cool.
I think he, according to his Wikipedia, he basically went into drama in school. Like, he went straight in. So yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. Yeah, no, it might have been Harrison Ford. Yeah, no, Harrison Ford was a carpenter. I think he was in his early 30s.
Yep.
I think he met George Lucas through someone or something.
Wasn't he? I thought George Harrison Ford. I was about to say George Harrison.
George Harrison. Oh, well, yeah. Rest in
Another
peace,
Beatle
George.
as well, which is a weird connection.
Yeah.
I thought he met him on a set, like he was helped building a movie set, and
It might have been something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Who knows? But
This is not a how did a director and an actor meet each other podcast. This is a Curb podcast, so
that's right.
We'll leave that to the mysteries of time.
Well, we do know that Ted was a bar owner, and then he became a doctor for a little while in New York. He did several things in the middle.
That's true. He was a baseball player as well. Like in Cheers, that's the storyline. He was a former baseball player, and then he retired, and with his baseball money started the bar.
Oh, that's how it worked, right? I never watched Cheers. I had no idea. So there you go.
I only knew that from I've watched a bit of Cheers, but I only know that from Frasier, because in Frasier he makes a guest appearance. And Frasier's dad, Marty, is a massive sports fan. Like, he's just a blue-collar sports guy.
Yeah.
So when he meets, I can't even remember his character's name in Cheers. When he meets him, he's over the moon because he was a fan of his when he was a famous baseball player in Cheers.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, there you go.
Before we move on to the next scene, did you sense a bit of, like, up until this point, for me, Ted in Curb has only been likable. Like, I've never disagreed with anything he said. I've never thought ill of him in any way. I've always thought his form has been 100% of the time. He's likable, he's charming, he's fair, he's firm, he's respecting. He's just a really likable, awesome dude.
He's basically the opposite of Larry.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Actually, you nailed it. He's the anti-Larry.
Yeah.
But just I detected this sense of like arrogance or something. There was something really that I disliked when he was like, fair enough, he didn't want a stranger to come into his party. Like, he was a bit like, who is this guy? But just when he said, like, I think he said something like, I'll just shove him in the back somewhere.
Put him in the kitchen.
Put him in the kitchen. Sense of like,
yeah. Yeah.
I don't want this guy is going to demean my party because he's just a limit. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it was the first time in Curb I detected a bit of just something unlikable in Ted. I just didn't like him in that moment.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Look, maybe he had a few drinks. It's his party, and then he shot his mouth off. I mean,
yeah. I don't think he's an arrogant person in the show, and everyone can have moments of arrogance or snobbiness or whatever for sure. But I don't know. It was just noticeable for me because it was the first time I thought, I just don't like you in this moment.
Who knows? Or maybe Ted, because a lot of it's improvised Curb. Maybe in that moment, Ted, was a bit elitist.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, it just felt a bit snobby. That's all.
A little bit snobby. No, that's fair. No, you're right, because he seems like, I'm not sure about real life Ted, but fictional Ted, yeah, he's basically butter wouldn't melt in his mouth.
No,
everything's right. He's the golden child of Curb.
Exactly. He's the man.
The man, that's right. Like the antithesis. Is it the antithesis of Larry? Like the opposite of
Larry?
Yeah.
He's the anathema of Larry.
The anathema, yeah, that's the one.
But yeah, the anti-Larry for sure.
He is, yes. Anyway, to wrap up the scene, Ted is eventually convinced to let the driver come in, but he said he'll put him in the kitchen or something like that. Ted is opening up his presence in front of the crowd as Jeff reminds Larry of the Paul McCartney concert as they're sitting on the couch, and he asks if Larry is excited about it. Larry says he is. Ted opens Larry's present, and he's disgusted by the Mondo Freaks book. Larry asks Ted if he can read the book, and Ted happily gives Larry the book. Larry and Jeff sit back on the couch. They begin laughing at the freaks in the book very loudly. They hear banging in the kitchen, and Charlie, the driver, is drunk, and he's stumbling out of the kitchen into the living area in front of the crowd, and he breaks one of Ted's vases. And Ted says, "Who's this guy?" And then Larry says to the crowd that it's his driver. Mary walks up to Charlie and yells at him to get out, and he walks off, and Mary claims that he groped her. And Ted tells Larry to get out of their house as Cheryl says sorry as they walk out of the door. So, lots of moving parts in this scene. Charlie, probably was an absolute mistake. Ted made the right call to not to bring Charlie in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, and he holds Larry responsible because he was a bit dubious, and Larry, sort of convinces him to bring him in. And his spidey sense or whatever made him a bit reluctant to bring him into the party was on point. One thing, it's not really about the scene specifically, it's just more about something I've noticed along, like in all sorts of TV shows and movies. The idea of adults opening presents in front of all their other adult guests. I've never been to a party, even a wedding, where there's like a big table of presents. Maybe it's an American thing. I don't know, but it's just whenever that comes up in a movie or a TV show or whatever, it's always so foreign to me. Where everyone's sitting around watching the birthday person or the whoever's party it is opening all the presents and kind of showing it to everyone, like, oh, look what Joe got me, or look what Mary got me, or whatever. I would hate that attention. Yeah. Like, I don't know, just a thought I had, and I wanted to know what you like. Have you ever seen that? Is that an American thing, or have I just never come across it myself? What do you think?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, look. If it's like a small gathering, like I had like a small birthday dinner, right? Last month, and there was like 10 of us, right?
Yeah.
And I got a few presents, which was nice, but I opened them in front of everyone because there's only like 10 people.
Well, that's different as well, because you're already sitting in a place. Like, whereas this is like, okay, everyone stop socializing, everyone come sit down,
so we can open presents like he's 5 years old.
Yeah, it's like a specific routine, and everyone has to sit down and find a seat or stand around.
Yeah.
Like at a restaurant, it's different because it's like, well,
I'm already here.
Yeah, it's not a specific ceremony, It's like, well, everyone's sitting around. You can't go. There's no like special present opening room in the restaurant that you go to. I know what you mean, but it's just, I feel like this is just so much more intentional, and it's just very foreign to me. That's all.
I don't know. Maybe because Ted likes being the center of attention. Maybe they just decide to do it.
That's true. As I'm talking about this and asking you about it, I feel like Larry, I'm just focusing on something that's not really that big of a deal and really like trying to drill down on it and say, what do you think about this? And why is this a thing? So I feel very Larry-ish in this moment.
Yeah, well, it's very like Larry. Well, to answer your question, I don't know. It could be an American thing.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. Maybe. I got no idea. But regarding those kind of scenes, I reckon the best one I've ever seen. There's actually some good scenes of it. Do you remember, like, just quickly, like, remember in Breaking Bad? I think it might be season 1 or 2, where they go to, like, a party and it was, like, Walter White's old associate, like, when they started that business together. And the guy's opening up all the presents and he's getting, like, huge things, and, they're getting, like, a golf clubs, or he's got this and this,
yeah,
and then he opens up this small one from Walt, and it's like ramen.
Yep.
And he looks at it, and then he's like, oh man, when Walt and I were studying in college, we used to go through these like every night, and it's like it wasn't necessarily the gift, but it was just like the nostalgia and like the memories of the gift.
Yeah, and it also showed I remember that scene really well, actually, because it really highlighted Walt's resentment, which was, I'm a working class teacher struggling to put food on my kid's table, and I gave up, a life of luxury and riches, and he's watching all of these rich people give each other rich presents, and he, knowingly can't afford a $5,000 watch or, whatever gifts are being given. And even though it's a really sentimental present too, I think that guy's name's Elliot. His old
Elliot, yes, that's the one.
Yeah, Elliot, obviously, it means a lot to him because it's sentimental to them and it's really meaningful about it just really highlights the choices that Walt didn't make, which leads him to have that anger that motivates his whole character.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good scene, actually. I forgot about that.
That's actually one that I liked, yeah. Whereas this scene, it did look like Ted was 5 years old and he was opening all his gifts in front of his friends.
Maybe that's it. It just seems very childish to me.
Yeah, it was. And then Charlie had to ruin it with his drunken antics.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of, even though he ruined the party, he kind of saved the scene for me as a viewer.
He did, yes. He made it more interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Who is he? Does anyone know? I think that's my driver.
That's your driver?
Yeah. This is the guy you brought into my house?
I'm sorry, man.
The guy's plastic. You just totally...
It was an accident. He didn't do it on purpose. You know what? He didn't do it on purpose.
Get out of here, stupid creep.
What happened?
That guy, the drunk guy, just groped me.
He what?
He just put his hands all over me. I don't
Son
believe
of
him.
a... You know something? You're out of here. Go on.
What?
Go on, get out of here, Larry.
What?
Get the hell out of my house.
It was an accident.
The trio, as in Cheryl, Charlie, and Larry, they walk to the car, and Charlie goes to jump in the driver's seat to go drive, but Larry says he's going to be driving as Charlie is too drunk. And Cheryl says, you know how to drive a limo?
Everyone's surprised.
Everyone, yes. Larry is driving the limo pretty well, actually. He drops Charlie off at his house as they take him up the stairs to the front door. He rings the bell, and Charlie's wheelchair-bound wife answers the door and berates Charlie for his behavior as he drunkenly stumbles onto the couch. They're having a bit of a conversation. Larry says to Charlie's wife that he'll bring back the limo tomorrow as she is getting more irritated. So she's basically on like level 11 from the start, isn't she? She's just like yelling and irritated, and there's no off switch for her.
Yeah, it seems like her life is very chaotic and hectic, and her stress levels are just at peak all the time. And then, it sounds like they arrived home like mid-argument or mid something tense going on, because as soon as she answers the door, they're like, who the fuck are you? And she's just on. It's not like she sees them and then gets angry. I think they interrupted a tense situation, and she just seeing her drunk husband come in and these strangers at their door just escalated it.
And you can see as well that they kind of, I wouldn't say live in squalor, but they're struggling a little bit. Their house, it's not a lovely house like Larry and Cheryl, and it's very run down. It's probably like in a not I wouldn't say a dodgy neighborhood, but maybe like a high crime
they seem
neighborhood.
like they're living. Yeah, they seem like they're living on the edge, like socially, financially, and that they've got a lot of stresses that Larry and Cheryl would be able to overcome financially in their life.
Yeah.
So,
you can see like the decor of the house, the furniture's old. So they're they're struggling.
I think we can sum up what we're trying to say in that. I think they're portrayed as, poor people.
Poor, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in poor. And I think they mentioned that Charlie's on, Charlie's wife's on a disability pension as well. So, I think that she mentions that in a later scene. And
their health insurance or their disability pension or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So, it's a very, very sad situation for them.
Totally.
The Davids are getting ready for dinner and the Paul McCartney concert as Larry says he doesn't want to be buried next to Ted anymore after what happened. And he asks if Cheryl's plot can go between him and Ted. And Cheryl's like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to be changing the plots around because of that situation. The doorbell rings. Larry greets Susie and Jeff as they walk in the door. Larry, for the first time in a long time, compliments Susie's outfit, like unironically. He actually really likes it. And Susie's, I don't know, Susie in this moment, she feels like, she got a compliment, even though it's from Larry, she feels pretty good about it.
Yeah, and it's probably extra meaningful as well because Larry's and her relationship is normally only 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it's, when it coming from that point of view, when someone gives a genuine compliment, it's extra meaningful because it's more unexpected.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just like we see a side of Susie where she just looks content.
Yeah, I think she's just unexpectedly, and it sounds like a genuine compliment. It doesn't sound like insincere. And I think she could sense that with Larry if it was insincere. So I think that makes it extra nice.
She'd tear him to shreds if he was just, saying it ironically.
Yeah.
Jeff asks Larry where the freak book is. Jeff wants more of it. He can't get enough of it. The scene cuts to the four of them having a toast. Larry says to the Greens and Cheryl that he's had enough of Ted Danson and that he doesn't want to get buried next to him and that he wants to get buried next to Susie. She says that she doesn't want to be next to him. She wants to be next to her husband as the conversation begins heating up.
Yeah.
Larry says that he takes back his toast and his compliment to Susie, even though Susie says Larry had a motive to swap plots when he said this. So to Susie, and it's probably to the viewer as well, Larry didn't actually mean that Susie the nice comments about Susie. She says that he had a motive to do it so he can swap plots.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why she thinks that he was just buttering her up to get the answer he wanted about the plot arrangement. But I don't know. It still sounded. Maybe he's just really good at faking a genuine compliment, and we as viewers bought it as well. But I still thought it was at least partially genuine.
I thought it was too. Too. But Larry has he's usually not genuine most of the time. Yeah, and then in that moment, even when he seems to be genuine, he does have a motive. There's a reason for it, which is insane.
It might have been a genuine compliment, but it was strategically timed. He might have actually meant what he said, but he said it in a certain way or at a certain time to get something out of her.
Yes, I think so. But yeah, that's a great scene when Susie suddenly just goes back to her old self.
Yeah, as soon as the bubbles burst, she's just like, well, nothing's changed. You're still an asshole,
yes.
And you're still only interested in your own what's important to you.
Yes, and she comes up with like her own theories. I love when she just comes up with theories about Larry. She's like,
half the time she's right, or partially right. Sometimes she's way off.
Like his sex perversions for like an episode or two ago. Yeah.
I do like how Larry said, if you don't want to stand next to me in real life, what is it? If you don't want to be near me in real life, I don't want to be near you in death or something like that.
Yes.
Oh, no. He said, if you don't want to be next to me in death, then I don't want to be next to you in real life, and then walks off.
That's right, yeah, because I was going to say they do argue about who'll be buried where, all four of them, and Larry does get upset. He does say that comment, and then he leaves in anger. He walks back in because he asks where his car went. Cheryl says that Leon took the car. So Leon in this episode is an unseen character. And Larry decides to go take the limo. Larry gets into the limo and he's in his suit, by the way, and he's struggling to to turn it around on the street. He ends up hitting a car. Softly when he reverses out. He eventually drives off. The scene cuts to Larry driving as he is having trouble with the sun. So it must be like, I think, sunset at that time. He puts on Charlie's limo hat, which is next to him. So now he looks like a limo driver. He's got the suit on and he's got the limo hat as well. He answers the phone in the car, and Charlie, the driver, apologizes to Larry about what he did. Charlie says that he has a VIP client and he doesn't have the car to pick him up. He asks Larry to do it, and after a bit of back and forth, Larry reluctantly accepts. Charlie says that the client is tennis player John McEnroe, and that Larry needs to call himself Charlie as he heads to the airport. So Larry can't turn up saying, "Hi, I'm Larry David, I'm here to pick you up." He has to pose as Charlie, where hilarity ensues.
Yeah, he can't just, obviously, maybe he's fucked up before and this is his last chance with his employer or something. And, if John mentioned to the limo service, hey, you sent me Larry instead of Charlie, they'd know that something happened. And yeah, it seems like that this is like his last chance.
Yeah, I feel like he has a history of this because So I think Charlie's motive, going back to that scene where Larry tries to insist on Charlie coming in, maybe Charlie knows he has a history of doing this. So that's why he's like, I'm staying here, I'm good.
Yeah, he's just like, no, I'll sit in the car, that way I can't get into trouble.
Yeah, and he's probably been ordered by his higher ups to stay in the car.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It does. Larry is at the airport waiting with a sign with the words John McEnroe on them as John McEnroe walks out and greets him. And Larry asks where he's going to go, and John says he's going to the Paul McCartney concert. The scene cuts to Larry driving John, and Larry just keeps waffling on about different things as he normally does. John asks Larry to keep quiet as he begins to get irritated. His famous reputation of being irritated and angry. John begins to act like that.
I think he handles it pretty well. Like he's not actually yelling directly at him. He's not telling him, shut up.
Not yet.
He's trying to imply, like, when he said, like, what does he say? He's like, do you do this in your life? And he's like, oh, actually, I just enjoy quiet these days. It's pretty like hinting, like, shut up.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like passively aggressively telling Larry to be quiet.
Exactly. And Larry, whether it registers or not, he just doesn't care. And he just, I'm guessing it doesn't register because we always say that he can't read the room and is completely, oblivious to anyone else's feelings or needs. One thing I notice, like Larry does waffle a lot. He usually talks at the person, like he gets rolling on an idea or fixates about something and just doesn't shut up about it.
It's just verbal diarrhea.
Yeah. And this one, even though he's talking, he's asking, rather than just talking at John, he's actually asking him a lot of questions. It's a subtle difference, I think, and it's just something I noticed.
Yeah, he's just like he's asking questions to John, right?
Yeah, it's like he's not shutting up, but instead of just telling him stuff, he's actually asking him stuff, and it's still verbal diarrhea, but it's just a different approach.
Probably because he's John McEnroe, he's a celebrity.
Yeah, he's not just a nobody or a woman he's trying to impress or whatever.
Yeah.
He's probably a bit more curious. I did like, how's your sex life, or how often do you have sex? I have sex once a week. Like he's just so, and he's like, what's the deal? He doesn't say what's the deal, but he's like, what's the deal about, why, kind of suggesting that sex shouldn't be as taboo a topic as it is. And, he's going on about gardening and sex and all sorts of things. Great scene. And John, like I said, I think John, considering his hair trigger anger, at least again on the court, he wasn't very cool under pressure, or he fired off at the
umpires
mouth, shot off at the mouth pretty consistently over something that wasn't a big deal. And usually he was wrong as well.
Yeah. You can't be serious. I can't be out.
You can't be serious. Throws his racket down and he's like, you're a beep, 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 beep. Yeah, he handles it pretty well, I think, in this, considering it's John McEnroe.
So far, yes.
Yeah, obviously that doesn't last, but it keeps a lid on it more than if it were on a tennis court.
That's true, yes. Larry says to John he has to stop at the cemetery for a couple of minutes, which bewilders John. He's like, why are we stopping here? Let's go to the concert. Larry pulls up to the cemetery, and he gives John the Mondo Freaks book. The scene cuts to Larry speaking to the cemetery supervisor, who is showing him empty plots, and Larry asks if he can get a refund as he wants to move plots elsewhere. The supervisor says no, he can't get a refund, but he can sell his current plot privately, and that Larry accepts to purchase the new plot. So the plan is that he wants to get a new plot away from Ted Danson and everyone else, and then try and sell his other one privately. So he's so awkward now towards Ted and what happened and everything, that he doesn't want to be near Ted, and even in death he wants to be away from him.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most perfect encapsulations of not Larry as a person, but Larry in relation to the rest of the world around him. That even in death, when you don't care because you don't exist anymore, like you don't have a consciousness to feel things about certain things, even in death, he still just wants to be away from everyone who he should care about and everyone who cares about him. So yeah, I thought it was the near perfect encapsulation of Larry's relation to the rest of the world.
Yes, so you're right. Yeah, and even in death, he wants to live like he did, mortally.
Yeah, it's just like, well, fuck these people. I'm just going to go out on my own and I don't care.
That's the man.
That's why we love him.
That's right. That's why we love Larry. The scene cuts to John in the limo. He's being impatient. He leaves the limo to go find, quote-unquote, Charlie, a.k.a. Larry. A grieving family, seconds later, walk towards the limo thinking it's theirs. And they walk into the limo, and one of them spots the Freak book. And they're all grieving, and the person who spots the book becomes even more upset. Larry walks back to the limo, he jumps in, and he's surprised that the family are in there. John opens the limo door, and he wonders what's going on as he sees the family in there. And Larry asks John to get in as Larry goes to drop the family off, which is near the concert. So there's a hilarity ensues, so there's a grieving family, and then John's like, this is my limo, why are all these people in here? This is a bit weird. The scene cuts to the family who are still grieving as John is getting very, very annoyed and impatient in the limo. Larry says that he can't find their house based on the directions that they gave him and the address, and that they are lost. Eventually, we see John McEnroe explode He tells Larry to pull the car over, and he tells the family to get out. The family get out, and they're stranded, and John and Larry drive off. So we see trademark John in this episode.
Yeah, he eventually cracks, and I think at this point he has a right to be a bit pissed off. He's been pretty tolerant and pretty cool so far, but when he's going to be late to a concert, he's paid for this limo. There's these strangers in the car. Larry's stopping off at funerals. Larry's just talking his ear off, asking him personal stuff. I think most people would break at this point, and maybe they wouldn't be as angry as John is, but they would certainly stop putting up with what they've been putting up with so far.
But yeah, he's had enough basically.
Yeah.
Larry and John arrive at the Paul McCartney concert, and John, he loves the Freak book. So him and Larry, despite all the things that they went through that afternoon and that evening, John and Larry find a connection with the Mondo Freaks book. It cuts to them being John and Larry. They seem to be at a like a skybox, or maybe like one of those first class things. Those function center things that you have at stadiums or concert halls or something. I'm guessing it's something like that.
Yeah, like a corporate box or a skybox or something. Yeah, where rich people, you can usually watch a sports game or watch a concert in with private service and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're in one of those. John asks Larry for another beer, and he's still mesmerized by the book. They sit down on the couch, and much like Jeff and Larry did earlier in the episode, and they begin to enjoy the pictures together, and they start laughing hilariously and very loudly as the crowd look on awkwardly. A woman depicted to be Heather Mills, you can't see her face, but you can see her from the back, confronts Larry about his comments. It's like, who are you calling a freak, you bald fuck? In a British accent.
Yeah, it's good.
You bald fuck. It's like a really Cockney kind of accent.
You bold fuck.
Who are you calling a freak, you bold fuck?
I can't recall Heather Mills' voice, but I doubt she sounds like that.
I don't think so. They probably just said, just do like a generic Cockney British accent.
Yeah.
Larry and John are being ejected out of the stadium by security. Cheryl and the Greens are driving past, and they're horrified to see what is happening as Larry and John continue to argue outside of the stadium. So they were friends, but now they're yelling at each other again. Absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Love it. John gets caught up in Larry's antics. And in the final scene, in the next morning, Larry drops off the limo to Charlie's house. He knocks on the door. Charlie answers. And his wife comes in, and she's grieving about her dead father, who died suddenly yesterday. And they wonder where they can bury him. And Larry comes up with a great idea in his head. And he says to them that he can help them out, as in he can probably sell the plot to them or maybe give the old plot to them. That's implied. And that's the end of the episode. That's the Freak book.
Yeah, that's it.
What a cracking episode, man. I said at the start of the episode, probably one of my favorite Curb episodes so far. 5 Larrys out of 5. I think it's, in my opinion, a classic. I loved the best parts were Larry and John McEnroe. John McEnroe was such a great sport. Yeah, it was just their interactions were incredibly enjoyable. And just the scene at Ted's and everything was just really, for me, really, really well done. For me, a classic. What about you?
I give this one a 4. I don't hold it in as high esteem as you do, but I thought it was a really good episode, especially after last week, the Ida Funkhauser Memorial, which we agreed that's probably the lowest point for season 6, and a bit of a haphazard episode, a bit disjointed. This one was much more, even though there was a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, it just felt more in control and more linked together. And yeah, I pretty much agree with you. The John and Larry scenes were great. Ted was great. Charlie, I really enjoyed Charlie's character.
Me too. Yeah, I enjoyed Charlie.
Yeah, and I thought Larry was pretty cunty in this episode, which is why we love him.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Freak book was a cool. Is it a MacGuffin? Is that the term?
I guess a MacGuffin or a plot device. Yeah, more of a MacGuffin. It doesn't really focus on the plot.
Yeah. It's a plot device MacGuffin, and I thought it was a really good episode, but not as good as you.
No, fair enough. Yeah, no. Well, I was saying to you before we started recording, man, that season 6, besides the Ida Funkhauser Memorial, Roadside Memorial, every episode's been like at least 4 stars. It's just with 4 Larrys. It's just been such a high caliber season so far. Yeah, no, the definitely overall, I don't think it's got my favorite episode of the show so far, but consistency, I think it's been the highest so far for sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, this one, it's not my favorite, but it's in my top 5, this one. Yep. Yeah, it's amazingly good. But yeah, absolutely agree. But anyway, and that was another episode of Curbcast. Thank you so much for listening. There are ways you can support the show. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Mishmash Media. Mishmash Media is our burgeoning podcast network where for $1 a month, you can keep the lights on over at our podcast network, Mishmash Media. We are in the process of getting some bonus content. Hopefully we'll bring that out to you later in the year. But in the meantime, you can support us, and where available, you can get early access to new episodes, I should say, of Curbcast. And Stephen, there are some ways you can contact us and find us on socials.
Yeah, that's right. We're on all the major socials. Curbcastpod is our handle, and there are links in the show notes. And we do have an email address, curbcastpod@gmail.com, if you want to say hello or talk anything Curb, again, in our show notes. And if you want to support us non-financially, you can rate us or review us on your podcast app of choice, or just spread the word.
Exactly. Anything would go a long way to bring the podcast to more fans of the show.
Indeed.
My name's Ivan.
I'm Stephen.
We'll catch you next week for another episode of Curbcast, and you take care of yourselves and each other. Catch you then.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is part of Mishmash Media, an independent podcast network. Follow us on social media at Mishmash Media AU, or support us on Patreon. All those links are in the show notes.